I'm Maxine Brown. I grew up in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and my undergraduate was at Temple University, where I took my first computer course. And I liked it so much, wanted to go to grad school in computer science. And University of Pennsylvania, also in Philadelphia, offered me a teaching assistantship. So I went there, and that's where I discovered computer graphics. So growing up, I loved art. I would draw pictures. I'd do fashion models and new outfits, or I'd make cards and posters. In high school, I got a 4-year weekend Saturday scholarship to the Philadelphia Museum of Art when I was good in math. So I decided to be a math high school teacher. So I go to grad school, and the computer science department was like 12 students. It was very small. And at University of Pennsylvania, our faculty, most of them were double E's, electrical engineers that had even worked on the ENIAC. I learned to program, and I learned, Fortran and PL1 and other languages. I went and got involved with a project that had to do with children learning computers in schools. They were starting to put terminals in the public schools and doing a little class on basic programming. It turns out that SIGGRAPH was going to be in 1976. It was going to be at University of Pennsylvania. And as an ACM member, student member, I subscribed, found out about this group SIGGRAPH, and I decided I was going to write a paper. That was my first introduction to SIGGRAPH. And I was just blown away because they were light years ahead of what I had available in grad school. And I was one person working in graphics, and there's this whole community of 200-300 people. That's a big deal to me. One of my professors, Norm Badler, introduced me to the people running the next year's conference. So I moved to the Bay Area. I worked for Hewlett-Packard, and I got involved with SIGGRAPH 77 in a big way. Then I went to another little graphics company in San Diego because I really wanted to do computer graphics. I did write a little graphics editor, a paint system, and then before I moved to marketing, then I left them finally, and I went to, because HP is mostly hardware oriented, not software. And I wanted software and applications. And there was a business graphics company in San Diego, ISCO, and I went to work for them. But I did a little teapot. It's in one of the SIGGRAPH slide sets from way back. I drew a greenish teapot. I drew it, just hand drew it, a teacup and a teapot, and I thought that was perfect, and I submitted it to the slide set, done on an HP prototype, blah, blah, blah. And so that was in the about 78, 79. I was at ISCO for 3 years. By 82, I got a phone call from Gary Demos at Digital Productions, and he said, I'm looking for a director of documentation, and somebody recommended you. Oh my God, Hollywood called. I moved to LA. Digital Productions, John Whitney Jr. and Gary Demos had just bought a Cray supercomputer. They were writing code like crazy. They hired programmers, and it was so new that they said, well, there's nothing to document yet. So I helped with a business plan, but I finally said, you don't need me yet. I'll come back, but I'm going to go out and be on my own for a few years. So I started consulting, doing technical writing. I bought a Mac Plus and a laser writer. After a couple of years, Digital Productions did ask me to come back. I did write a manual for their software. When I started, the first big project, their movie, was The Last Starfighter. I finally convinced Gary we needed marketing. So I went to IEEE, Computer Graphics and Applications magazine. If you look up Digital Productions in Wikipedia, there's 2 references, and my article is one of them. And I forced him to give pictures to SIGGRAPH. And again, I was more documenting, so my name's not on the movie credits. And then we all know in 86, the world changed because Wavefront, Bill Kovacs started Wavefront, so you could buy software, and Jim Clark started Silicon Graphics, and you could buy hardware. And even though they were expensive, they were a heck of a lot cheaper than what the production companies were using. And all the software at the production companies were proprietary, so no one could use their software. You had to go through them. And now anybody could be a computer graphics programmer. Now people could bring things in-house. In '86, when everything imploded, I saw Tom Defani at SIGGRAPH, and at that point, I had been volunteering. I started volunteering in '77 after my first attendance was '76, '77. I was attending. I was involved in the conference. Tom and I were on the executive committee. So I happened to mention that I might need a new job. Tom called me up a week later and had secured some funding for me to come work for a year or two. I had been to his lab. I had met his students. We were all about the same age. And so that's what brought me to Chicago. Tom was trying to raise money for a museum project here. We didn't need a lot of money, but the university gave us some money. Urbana, Larry Smarr at the National Center for Supercomputing Applications gave us some money. In the early days of SIGGRAPH, the evening film show was a new technological contribution to the field. There was one of smoke from a cigarette just curling up. This is fluid dynamics. This is when it was hard to do. We're all sitting there going, whoa, look at the smoke going up in the air. I miss that. And now they're wonderful little stories made with software packages by very creative people, but it's still a very different environment. So in '77, Steve Levine was the chair. Jim George was his papers chair, but he was also the chair of the SIGGRAPH organization. And they became my mentors. I was the first person to document the courses. They would send out a postcard in those days or write something in the SIGGRAPH newsletter, which was a quarterly magazine. So when they mail out a reminder, it's time to register for the conference, we included, here's the courses that are going to be offered. I hand drew them, by the way. Steve Levine really, really wanted t-shirts. Now, this is back in '77. I spoke to a t-shirt guy, and he said, tell you what, best thing to do is I'll make you decals. I'll give you a bunch of t-shirts, but you return what you don't use. You only pay me for what you use. So I hand drew the logo because there were no off-the-shelf paint programs that I was aware of. I did the word SIGGRAPH in a circle where the letters went from 2D to 3D and from vector to raster. And I got one of these hot presses, sat in the conference suite in the living room area. Every night I'd be pressing, decals onto t-shirts. The other thing Steve Levine really wanted an exhibit, because the year before in Philadelphia in '76, there were 12 exhibitors and they were on the top floor of a student dormitory. And Steve Levine and Jim George worked for Livermore National Lab and Los Alamos National Lab, and they were buying equipment. So they went to all their graphics suppliers and they got them to sign up for a real exhibition. And we went from just a few people to like 40 exhibitors. I have the actual number somewhere, but it was in around 40. And so they were growing the exhibits. And they put them in a ballroom. In those days, they didn't bring equipment so much as just had a table with literature and salespeople. But I have photographs from then. So they were bringing terminals and displays in the '70s to showcase what they were doing. I got involved with all aspects or many aspects of the SIGGRAPH conference. It's also the first time I saw the film and video show, which blew my socks off. The year before, they had 300 attendees. So we were expecting 400, 500, but we did such a good PR job and we had so much to offer with the vendors also helping publicize. We had 750 people and we weren't prepared for it. So we hired temps to sit at the registration desk and register people. That was my introduction to SIGGRAPH. The next year's conference had already picked a committee, so I wasn't really involved in '78, but they did invite me to help on site with registration and other odd jobs. In 79, Steve Levine and Jim George were worried about the exhibits. They didn't want to lose them, and they didn't feel they were treated as well as they could have been in 78. They decided they were going to run the exhibits, and they looked at me and they go, and you're helping us. So we were co-chairs of the exhibits. I did all the paperwork. I did all the organizing. And in 79, it was held here in the Chicagoland area near the airport, O'Hare Airport in Rosemont. And Tom DeFani hired a company that supplied the drapes and the rugs, and we moved the exhibits from a ballroom to an exhibition hall. In the subsequent years, I helped on courses. I was in course committees, art committees. I was on panels. I participated in courses as well as organized courses, like when to applaud at the film show. In 84, I became chair of the Electronic Theater. I renamed it the Electronic Theater because it was still the film and video show. They had laser shows. I wanted live performance too. Some naysayers in the SIGGRAPH leadership said, oh, you shouldn't do that. Live performance could fail. Well, I had a jury. On that jury was Ed Emschwiller, another wonderful pioneer. He goes, Maxine, that's why they have Broadway. They want to see it live. We did get a performance by Ed Tannenbaum and Marcy Javriel's first time SIGGRAPH did live performance. It was a big success. So that was 84. In 89, they asked me if I wanted to run the SIGGRAPH conference in 92 in Chicago. I became chair of the 92 conference. I had a couple advantages. One being I had run or been involved in almost every aspect of the conference. Two, they gave me 3 years. And 3 years, we had time to plan. My lab developed the cave, the room-size virtual reality environment. Part of that came out of SIGGRAPH because companies were starting in 89 to show head-mounted displays. One company, they had about 10 head-mounted displays tethered to a bar. So all these people are in line, all having this experience next to one another. I was with some people who said, wouldn't it be nice if they could collaborate and see the same thing? So I would say that SIGGRAPH was a big impetus for us developing the cave so that people could collaborate. Up until 92, every film show and every art show had their own throwaway catalog. I wanted one book, The Visual Proceedings, which we introduced, that had all the other events other than papers and panels that people could reference. And so I wanted an ISBN number and I wanted ACM to archive it. Very successful conference, and we had 30,000 people. We broke records. And it was a scary time because the Persian Gulf War had started the year before, and the United States stopped international traffic to Asia for a while. So we saw a drop in exhibitor booth space. We had reception with Chicago hot dogs and Garrett popcorn and pizza because that's a Chicago thing. And people thought this was great food and way lot cheaper than other things. We had our own entertainment one night. Steve Levine was an accomplished pianist. And I said, for Thursday night's reception, I want SIG Band. Jim Blinn participated and several other people, John Hart. There was about a half a dozen or more. And Steve, God bless him, even found people who sang, and they were they would accompany the music, and it was kind of lively. So we did a lot of fun, creative things. And we had SIG Kids. She actually had kids come on site and had mentors work with these kids all year, and they had projects to show off. And we had Showcase, that's where we premiered the cave. We had something we called G-Tech for Guerrilla Tech, where since Showcase was really high performance computing, and we had workstations where people could show things as well as the cave, we had G-Tech for PC or laptop-based desktop visualizations that were in progress from universities. So I had to go read my final program to know all this. And we also, for the first time, networked McCormick Place and brought networking into the conference. And our art show chair, John Grimes, I think he used the network. He had people submit art remotely. And he had a big corkboard where he'd put up people's pictures as they came off our printer. So he accomplished quite a lot for 92. The keynote, because of this emphasis on networking, Larry Smarr knew a vice president of AT&T who had written a book, Silicon Dreams, I think it was. His name was Robert Lucky. Well, he was a visionary. You know, what was coming for the home, what was coming for academia first. And so he was our keynote speaker. Another thing we did was CD-ROMs for the papers. That was a first, and that was Ed Catmull's idea. And it was not mass produced. He made like 250 or 500 because most people didn't even have CD-ROM readers then. But he wanted to try this new tech. So that was just another plus that we did. The one thing I forgot is I am wearing a 92 committee shirt. That's me, believe it or not. They morphed me into a mandrel. In 92, we had an art student, Mary Rasmussen. She worked on a project to age missing children, and they actually had a big success rate in Chicago with the police. They used it to morph us into any animal that we wanted to be morphed into. So she had a couple, like a tiger and something, you know, things like that. And when it came time for the SIGGRAPH conference, Tom DeFani started talking about how we were so maxed out because we were exhausted because of all the planning and the work that went into it. And we decided we want to morph me into a mandrel. So it says maxed out. We had a conference shirt that we sold, and then we had this one. My ego is such that it didn't bother me at all. I designed SIGGRAPH's first logo, and we made that logo into t-shirts. So here's the t-shirt. We took orders by day and ironed them on by night. While I was helping on the conferences, Jim George was chair of the SIGGRAPH organization, and he got me involved, and I became secretary in 1981 through 85. And what's notable about that time is that Tron came out in 1982, and every kid in the universe wanted to get involved with computer graphics. And as secretary, I started getting a lot of letters. How do I get into this field? What do I study? I felt SIGGRAPH should start an education committee. I called a birds of a feather meeting at the next SIGGRAPH because the letters were starting to be a tsunami for me to handle. Lo and behold, Steve Cunningham and Judy Brown showed up at the first meeting, as did many other people. Judy and Steve contributed for decades and ran the education committee. I feel very proud of. And here's a picture, but me sitting next to Phil Morton in the AV kitchen for 84 in Minneapolis, where it was held. I found out while we were doing site visits that the arena had an organ. Garth Hudson of the band was very interested in playing it for free. This is a SIGGRAPH Quarterly, and it went out in 1987. I typeset and helped edit the whole thing, and it went to thousands of people. So I'm very proud of this report because I think it changed the world. Donna Cox and Mike Norman, it's a fluid dynamics. And since the report was really about the supercomputer centers, and Donna worked for the National Center for Supercomputing Applications, and we worked with them because we're all in Illinois, we selected that image to be on the cover. And then I continued with SIGGRAPH on committees, and in 1998, SIGGRAPH developed the Outstanding Service Award, and I got notification that I was the first recipient. And they said that it was because I was on so many different projects, from courses to the electronic theater to panels to chairing a conference. I want to share with everybody. It's still on my wall at home, and you're going to see reflections out my window. But this is the SIGGRAPH Outstanding Service Award 1998. The funny thing about this is 98 was the first time I missed a conference in over 20 years, because the National Science Foundation was still very much interested in the work we were doing with networks. They thought that having visualization people be involved with advanced networking was really cool and really important. And so Tom Defani and I were told, not because NSF was providing us with funding, that we should attend this networking conference, and it happened to be the same week as SIGGRAPH. So I asked some of my students to go and accept the award on my behalf. Well, they told alumni of the Electronic Visualization Lab, and I was told afterwards that 35 students went up and accepted the award on my behalf.